My experience was I was held up. I worked in a TAB while I was at university. Very quickly, I pushed that to the side. And then nearly 2 years to the day, I was in a meeting at work, and not a stressful meeting, and I had a full-blown panic attack. Dr. Maria Elena Lukeides, welcome to Stay at the Top. I've been a patient of yours for over 10 years. Do you think a lot of people are just experiencing a disconnection from what their body is experiencing to what the mind is experiencing, and they're numbing out nearly or disconnecting from that to be able to cope?
We're chronically bracing in a world that is tough, and we're using cortisol and grunt to get through our days. And a lot of that is being fueled by these endless minor daily threats. Trauma isn't what happened to us, and depression in many ways is not about the depression. It's about how we then relate to ourselves because of the experience that we're having.
If there was one thing, one anchor you'd like to leave people with?
Learn to drop into your body and out of your mind. The mind often created the problem. It's not going to fix it.
Dr. Maria Elena Lukeides, welcome to Stay at the Top.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, and congratulations on this amazing podcast.
Thank you. I am really enjoying leveling it up, bringing on amazing guests, bringing the science into the practical application, and hopefully having conversations from a lens that maybe people haven't heard them from before. That's the goal anyway. Which I would love to start with an amazing experience I saw on your social media recently. A very well-known author, Bessel van der Kolk, author of The Body Keeps Score. He wasn't just in Sydney and you didn't just attend his show. He came to your private practice.
He certainly did.
What was that experience? What was the conversation? Tell me everything.
Well, to be fair, I had met him the weekend prior, and we had been on a very small and intimate learning kind of conference/retreat with him and his beautiful wife, Lucia Skye. And actually my primary relationship is with Lucia, and she's one of the most wonderful somatic practitioners. And we had a beautiful 4-day experience in the Byron hinterland where we discussed approaching trauma and working with patients with trauma, primarily with psychedelics and some of those new novel ways, and embodying practices of somatic experiencing, and, you know, which of course is what The Body Keeps a Score highlighted so amazingly 10 years ago, or when the book came out. It's probably more than a decade now. And so Lucia had, when she came to Sydney after that retreat, had said she wanted to come and see me, and Bessel said, I'm coming too. And so we had a beautiful chat, and, you know, mostly about, you know, my work with psychedelics. I was, I guess, given that the rescheduling in Australia only happened a couple of years ago, I'm one of the first psychologists that has been working in that field. I did my training about a year before the rescheduling, so I was luckily at that forefront, because we weren't certain it would ever get rescheduled. But Mind Medicine Australia and so many other practitioners and researchers and professionals in Australia were really pushing, and the global evidence is amazing for those treatments, especially in cases where no other treatment has worked before. And so Bessel, not just an author, is a psychiatrist, and ran one of the first programs in psychedelics for trauma, and is still using psychedelics, ketamine, which is still under the umbrella of a psychedelic at the moment, in treatment of people with severe treatment-resistant trauma in the States. And so it was fantastic to share our experiences, you know, since the rescheduling, and also his vast knowledge and expertise, and Lucia's knowledge and expertise in the area of trauma recovery, and the use of these novel medicines in that space as well.
Yeah, truly your work in this space is a pioneer, like you said, at the forefront. To my understanding, only a very small minority of people within Australia, and of which you've had a hand in helping and supporting and, you know, taking people through that process. For someone listening, and maybe some of the misconceptions they might be having, what do you want to explain about the process that you take in this very methodical, scientific way versus potentially what people might be thinking we go to the jungle and we take a plant medicine and we do it ourselves?
So my work in the psychedelic space obviously is done in a very highly regulated way. And I think what the space offers actually is that from growing knowledge bases from around the world, I don't think there's a one way only. But given that this is treating people that have had many years, often, one of my clients was 40 years diagnosed with trauma.
Wow.
That's, someone who's, quite clinically, different to someone who I would say we all have traumas with small t, right? I could go and have a whole number of psychedelic experiences and still reveal things from within me that I find help liberate me and cause some sort of deepening of healing, for example. But I would be someone who would potentially be called a wellness seeker. The rescheduling in Australia wasn't for wellness seekers, so people who are functioning well could use a little bit of help with their things that they've experienced in the past, beliefs, traumas even, but aren't in that category of what we call treatment-resistant PTSD or treatment-resistant depression. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that it's a frontline medicine at the moment or treatment, and it actually isn't. It's for the rescheduling was very strict, and they're very cautious because it's brand new. And I kind of see it being rolled out similar to the way cannabis was when it also first got rescheduled, where there were very few kind of candidates that were able to be prescribed that and very few prescribers. And in Australia at the moment, we still only have, I think, about 20 authorised prescribers, and they are psychiatrists who are authorised to be able to assess and prescribe these medications. And we've only had a couple of 100 people through, even though the number of people with treatment-resistant PTSD and treatment-resistant depression is well into the thousands. And so we're still very, very careful and at the stepping stone of the treatments. And I think it's really interesting that we're having this talk today, because wasn't it just a couple of days ago that America also approved ibogaine, which is a psychedelic for the treatment of, again, treatment-resistant PTSD, trauma, and I think addictions, although I haven't seen. So we're definitely, Australia, very interestingly, was the first country to reschedule for use in the psychiatric / psychology space. So I think some of the misconceptions is when it can be used and whether or not everyone's a candidate. And so those two conditions are really, relevant. And treatment resistant as a diagnosis means that you've tried 2 to 4 standard evidence-based treatments in the past, combination of pharmacotherapy and psychological treatments, and none of those have brought you any benefit. The other kind of, I guess, the big myth is a lot of people ask me when I do this work is, so do you just microdose? Do you take it? Guys, it's not a microdose. So it's actually dosing days. So the way that the treatments are delivered is that we have 3 preparation sessions after the assessment. So there's assessment, and I'll talk a little bit about the exclusions if that's relevant. There's an assessment period. Then there's 3, once you're approved, there's 3 preparation sessions. Then there's the first, what we call the dosing day, which is a full day in an authorised space, so a space that is, running as a psychedelic clinic. So there also has to be the clinics that are able to provide these services have had to be, carefully, conform to certain requirements, and they have to be, registered as authorised clinics. So there's an authorised prescriber, which is a psychiatrist, and authorised clinic. You attend the clinic, usually early in the morning. You have 2 therapists with you, a primary therapist and a secondary therapist, and you are given either MDMA or psilocybin. And the treatment the dose lasts for about 6 to 8 hours. And it's we try and make it a beautiful, comfortable space with, nice soft lighting, soft furnishings, blankets. So it looks like a really nice lounge room, right? Some pot plants, but you're invited to lie down, and we have like a kind of mattress that can be pulled out for the floor, and we, provide a playlist. So the music goes hand in hand with this therapy, which I think is pretty unique.
Yeah.
So there's a curated playlist, and we put the playlist on so you hear the music through headphones. And we also recommend eye mask as well.
Okay.
And this is because with both MDMA and psilocybin, it really enhances your experience with the outside world. So people who take it recreationally, discuss things like, feeling a lot more talkative with others. They're seeing plants and different figures in trees and the sky, and, people's faces being a little bit visually enhanced in some ways, altered. So it's an altered state of consciousness. But because we want the treatment to actually target an internal experience by actually having the music being played into, headphones. So you've got this kind of masking effect, and the eye mask, it actually really allows the experience to become internalized. And that's where the medicines start really working. And the experience is different for everybody. And I would not say that it's necessarily pleasant. It's not an easy journey. It's not an easy medicine day, especially for those with trauma. It can bring up memories of trauma. People might have a sense of reliving them.
Is it essentially, it's accessing where that's stored or
sometimes?
Yeah.
Every journey is different. I've done, about a dozen, approximately a dozen people, and everybody's journey is different. And I can only say, based on all the research, based on what we know as practitioners who have studied, every journey you have can be, and every individual's journey will be different. So we try and prepare people as best as possible, which is what that preparation is for. Often people will also talk about these experiences as being life-changing and, second sometimes to the birth of their children, the most important experiences that they've ever had. It can be very mystical and spiritual as well, a sense that you've been given insights that you were never able to really get before. And I guess, for me, not many of my patients, I would say, who did trauma work with me didn't get some significant gains from their work with me. But what I'm really seeing the difference with psychedelics, because I can't necessarily say that this is working when nothing else works, because I think the modalities we have are also extremely effective in the non-psychedelic space. But when we do therapy, the way I like to describe it is all the things that I'm teaching you are still hypothetical. Hypothetically, you're lovable. Hypothetically, it wasn't your fault. Hypothetically, you didn't deserve what happened to you. Hypothetically, you're worthy. And in some ways, we all have to latch on to that faith, right? That surely we don't believe that others deserve the things that happen to them, or that we don't see others as undeserving, unworthy, unlovable. Ergo, it must also be true of us, right? And we have to just take it on faith. What has been beautiful to see and experience in that room is that people come out and they're like, they feel it. And for some of my patients, it's the first time they've ever felt love.
Wow.
Like real experiential love that has got nothing to do with somebody else, which again can go wrong, right? And has nothing to do with like something conditional being in their environment that can change that. And so for me, it is the medicine of love.
Okay.
That is ultimately what I think is bringing some of this healing. Now, that kind of overstates it quite a bit. Not everyone's going to get there or have that experience. And it's not that they're failing. They still can get beautiful, great insights that then provide years of therapeutic, does that make sense, outcomes and therapeutic insights. I had one patient come out and go, oh my God, that was like 12 years of therapy.
Wow.
In 2 hours, like she's like saying like these insights were just dropping one after the other, after the other, after the other. And because they weren't coming from somebody else or through the therapeutic work, it really felt like they were a sense of a real truth. And what's interesting about these experiences, unlike other kind of inebriated experiences that we have under substances, is we come out of psychedelics and that MDMA treatment, and people are saying and experiencing what occurred in that medicine treatment as more real than even our normal reality, where substance use and substance use experiences, usually you kind of come out of that experience and you feel as if, that was all fake, or that, okay, that's gone now. That was like a heightened experience that was artificially or superficially altered via the substance. Whereas with these psychedelics and MDMA, we're actually having people kind of go, I felt it, that it was more real than this was. I felt that what was coming was so real. And I think this is what has that potential to really change therapeutic outcomes, to really change symptoms, to really change how this person relates with themselves. Because trauma isn't what happened to us. And depression in many ways is not about the depression. It's about how we then relate to ourselves because of the experience that we're having, because of the beliefs and thoughts about ourselves and about the world and about our relationship with the world and the world's relationship with us. And these are opportunities for someone to experientially, from the inside out, have a different experience and to hopefully integrate that as real and as their own and as something that lasts beyond that medicine day moment.
And then what happens off the back of the medicine day? Because I imagine it's not just, we're all done here.
No,
like there's a lot of ongoing.
No. And so then we have 3, and I use the word integration, 3 integration sessions after each. I would say actually a minimum of 3 because everybody is different and some people have a lot of, need a lot more time to integrate and to stabilize some of the experiences and insights that they gained from that first dosing day. And so we have a minimum of 3 integrations. We meet usually very quickly after that first dosing day, the immediate day after or within the next couple of days. And then, we meet weekly. And then we plan after about 4 weeks for the second dosing day. The same kind of flow occurs, 3 integration sessions, and then a final 3rd dosing day if required, which, the model is from research shows 3 dosing days and the integration sessions as essential, not just additive. And so it's not just psychedelics, and that's the other myth. It's not the medicine in and of itself. It's that the medicine does something, provides the basis for insights, and afterwards the therapy is what really allows those insights to become integrated, meaning what? Interwoven within that person's new way of experiencing themselves, the world, and the world in relation to themselves and themselves in relation to the world. And that is really what that leads to those long-term outcomes that we're seeing through the research.
I imagine with that kind of access to such trained clinicians, like you have a doctorate, you're a clinical psychologist, as you mentioned, other people involved, psychiatrists. I imagine access to this from a cost perspective is maybe one of the biggest limiting factors for people who meet criteria.
Yeah, I think there's cost is, at least in Australia, really eye-watering compared to what we're normally paying for medical, because we have such a generous Medicare system. So the reality is I don't know if the treatment really does cost that much. It's just that there's no rebates for it. So if you think about how many hours of therapy are involved in that, so you've got, 2 therapists doing 3 preparation sessions, 8 hours on the dosing day, another 3 integration sessions, another 8 hours on the dosing day, and so on and so forth. Then we've got clinic costs. Obviously, the clinics also charge a facility fee, just like if we went to get our tooth removed, right, from a hospital, right? We have to pay an operating theatre fee or a suite fee. And then we also have the authorised prescriber also has to be in the clinic on the day of the dosing, or is themselves part of that therapeutic dyad, the dyad meaning the 2 therapists who work together on the day to ensure that the person is never left alone. And so Bessel actually tells a funny story about how the 2 therapists, actually the dyad became the standard practice was because they were, doing these psychedelic treatments in research and someone had to go to the toilet. But unfortunately, in that same moment, even though apparently it was a very, kind of ordinary session where the person was, seemingly just lying down and having their experience, they started to cry and need help, and the therapist wasn't there. So they decided after that dyad is essential and really important, and also gives the person the encouragement and safeness and supportiveness in that room to be able to know that they're safe while, they might also be re-experiencing really strong feelings that are fearful or reliving trauma experiences. So it's I would say it's a very safe, from the studies, the safety efficacy of these treatments without the exclusion. So, sometimes people can't have, some cardiac issues and things like that. There are a number of exclusions, but the safety profile is phenomenal. So that's also good. It just can be quite difficult in the journey itself. What's
kind of coming up for me as you're talking here is the connection to the body and the mind, and maybe how disconnected, I guess what we're talking about is people resistant PTSD, other forms of treatment have not provided relief, support, etc. If we kind of come back to whether people have any mental illness or insomnia or anxiety or depression, or whether, we're just high-performing people operating in the current world, do you think a lot of people are just experiencing a disconnection from what their body is experiencing to what the mind is experiencing, and they're numbing out nearly or disconnecting from that to be able to cope?
Yeah. I think it's one of the things that I see constantly. And again, let's leave aside, kind of serious presentations, which are, chronic and treatment resistant, and just look at that day to day. I don't know if I've ever seen more stress in my life. And maybe because I'm, almost 50 now, and, us 50-year-olds like to say things like that. And I find myself sounding like an old person suddenly, in my time, I've never seen this before, but I'm looking around, and there's like it's almost like you can touch the anxiety in the air. Like people are under pressure. And I don't just think it's because they've disconnected from their bodies. I think our worlds have required it, like the constant pressure. The technology integration within our lives, there's constantly something buzzing, something beeping, something, alarming us to get on to the next task. Let's move forward. Let's go. We're, having children, but we're packing them up at 7 a.m., dropping them off at daycare, then rushing to get to work before we're late to get to those meetings. Then every other time, point in the day is kind of measured in terms of this quick now to the next task, quick now to the next task, quick now to the next task. And if we're lucky, we leave work at 6, then we commute home in traffic, hoping that they're not going to get you in trouble for being the last one to pick up your child from daycare, not to mention the emotional toll that takes, knowing that you're driving there with your heart in your mouth. You get them, you pick them up from daycare or from school, you then go home, then it's dinner time, homework time, unraveling time, bonding time, eating time, bath time. Should I go on? Like, are you just getting, I can see your eyes just going stress, 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 stress. Now, I'm not saying we have choices in this, and I kind of feel like there has been this carving out in the way that modern work demands, modern expenses have forced this kind of slow change. But we're away from them home more hours than not. If we're working from home, that's great, but increasingly now people are forced back into the office. But even working from home, you're working, you're not, being in peace, you're still on that demand of that alarm clock. So I think that amount of pressure puts us constantly into the head, makes us over-reliant on the thinking mind. And when we're up here, we're not here. And here is where we're able to both be sensitive to lower levels of stress and angst. When the feelings come up in the body and we're in the body, we actually have an opportunity to respond when the feelings are a 3 out of 10. When we're in the mind constantly running off tasks lists, thinking about how we're going to have to do something, having multiple streams of to-do lists coming up, problem-solving strategies, we have to be up here. And so the body only bothers us when it's an 8 or a 9. It's fighting for attention. And so that is that disconnection, and that we're chronically bracing in a world that is tough, and we're using cortisol and grunt to get through our days. And a lot of that is being fueled by these endless minor daily threats. You know, you're going to be late for the next meeting, anxiety, flurry, right? My body then hardens, it armors. It tightens everything. Our breathing changes. We can't breathe deeply when all of my belly, my chest is tight, tongue up, jaw clenched. And when we downregulate and we start to pace a bit slower, connect more to the body through somatic downregulation. You know, I've got a technique, dropping anchor, that I know you know well, which is like the super powerful panic attacks and panic and anxiety, because it downregulates your system. But the real magic of that technique is it stops you thinking. And it kind of instantly almost, right, remember, like it just drops you into your body and like, and you notice, I was all like this, and not loose and soft. Because, you know, enlightenment is a series of softenings, which is a beautiful phrase. And it means that we stop resisting or working through life as if it's a battle that we're fighting through. And I often think about this because I'm battling through to get to the end of the day. And the only place I'm getting to quicker is my death. If we just think of that as an accumulation of daily experiences. It's this hustle that is life. And if I'm resisting it with everything I have and trying to get away from it, at some point there's an 80% block. And so of course then I disconnect from my body. My body can't talk to me because I'm braced. I'm literally saying, do not bother me. We are in threat and attack mode. And so we have this like tiny window, maybe through sheer exhaustion, at about 8 p.m., maybe 8:30, to when we finally collapse into sleep time, for the body to start to downregulate, for the immune system to start to go and find things to heal if it needs that, for emotion regulation to occur as well, because guess what? It's in those phases that emotions start to get integrated and processed. For us to be able to have a space to relax, to release, to connect. And one of the most immune superpower things, I don't know how to phrase it, like the biggest superpower we have is love. And this isn't some woo, oh, look at this, you know, psychologist talking about love. This is science. Oxytocin. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone of the mammal. But it's under oxytocin, in that emotionally regulated state where we're able to be relaxed enough for oxytocin to start to be produced, where the system can now start to rest and recover, that we feel connected, that we actually are able to enjoy things. It is a state of non-threat and non-doing. You can't be in oxytocin mode and be hitting goals. You can't be in oxytocin mode and scared about what might happen tomorrow morning. It is a state where there is nothing else to do. You have successfully navigated your day. It is a homeostasis, a state of complete satisfaction. And what I mean by that is there's nothing that you want in that state. If you have a baby and you're breastfeeding or, you know, feeding the baby in that kind of milk drunk state that they get in once they've fed, and there's nothing, they're rolling around, they're happy, they're laughing, they're giggling. It's such a beautiful thing to witness. And that's oxytocin kind of, that's that mode. They're no longer hungry, they're not wet, they're not cold, mum's nearby. They're in a state of complete satisfaction of needs. It's a state of non-wanting. And in that state, it's not just about rest and sleepiness, because we think rest is sleeping. Sleeping is part of the rest system. But creativity, art, connection, play is also part of the sleep system. Rest system, I should say. So this restful state is not just about sleepiness or tiredness. It's actually also the state in which if I've got no tasks that I need to engage with and finish, and I'm also not threatened by anything, there's no win or lose, there's no threat of failure, I'm in a state of no threat. What happens in that state? Play, which is what? Creativity, new ways of thinking, right? Novelty, interest-seeking, fun. And the body then is able to really regulate and recover and repair in that state. And in terms of like peak performance, people are going to focus on how do I stay in dopamine for longer? And I'm like, no. You need to be like, how do I shut down that dopamine system so that I can get into oxytocin? Because the more I rest and recover, the more I'm able to be efficient in that go world. The more I'm in oxytocin, the more fuel I'm amassing. My body's able to produce better fuel, better energy. We feel energized. We feel happy. What is happiness? I want you to just take a moment and I want you to think of something that really makes you happy. Do you have something in mind?
Probably just at the moment, the phase of life, morning, although she's starting to refuse the baby chino, but the morning ritual of, coffee for me, baby chino with Millie, like it's a non-negotiable, and just that protected time. And
when you think about that time, it sounds beautiful. Can you drop anchor for a moment? Can you just release your belly? And at the same time, I just want you to gently open your mouth, drop your tongue to the bottom of the mouth. And just, how does your chest feel? What kind of experience are you having if you bring that moment of joy into your chest, into your belly, into your throat?
Ignited.
It's an up and out, isn't it? So if we think about what happiness, joy, love feels like, it's an up and out. It's a bursting, we even have a sense of bursting, bursting with joy. We use these phrases. And so this whole concept of how much more energized we can become when we purposefully and intentionally create opportunities for oxytocin by having a sense of clear demarcation about, okay, my doing, off the chores, is done. Now, that doesn't mean I don't do chores in oxytocin mode. But rather than trying to get them off a list, which is making them into either a threat response, which these chores are in the way of me resting and they become threats, which is really dangerous, right? Because when we're fueling with adrenaline or fear, our actions, because we can fuel with dopamine or we can fuel with adrenaline. When I fuel with dopamine, I naturally have a sense of ego inflation or a sense of power when I complete things. I feel good, right? My self-esteem is better. I feel like, okay, I've taken care of the world today. I've taken care of my jobs today. I've done good. It's a great feeling. And if I've done enough good in the day, then I switch naturally to oxytocin. Okay, I'm done now. Where's the play? I can relax. And chores are sometimes, the cooking can be part of that, the bonding with the kids, the homework, depending on how we see these things. These things aren't fixed activities. How we approach them determines, are they threats? Are they, goals that we're going to hit and release dopamine?
And is that just the inner talk, the reframe?
I think so. Yeah. For me, absolutely. I have a story that I tell in one of my courses that I run. I think it's the Pillars of Happiness course. And you talk about your daughter, and I remember things were very difficult when I had my daughter at that age. I was a solo mom. I was running my practice. I was finishing my PhD. And unfortunately for me, and anyone who knows me, it's like, whether it's a trait that's a good trait or a bad trait, but I'm super house proud. I want my house to be perfect. So, of course, the chores were always done. Everything was always perfect. So there was an immense amount of pressure on a day-to-day basis. And there are certain things in terms of housework that I have pet hates with. Other stuff I just do. It's almost like I do it in my sleep. I don't even notice housework. Mopping, I don't know why. I vacuum like 5 times a day. If like anything that drops, I'm just like, oh, it's an upright vacuum. It's the easiest thing in the it's just like blinking. Mopping, something about that. And the other thing is hanging clothes on an outside line.
It's funny, we've all got our things.
We've got our things, right? So I remember like getting out there and being like, always, pegging the cloves on the line, and I'm like, muttering to myself as I do because, anger is my love language. And I'm like, and I'm the only one that has to do this, and look at the cloves and they never finish. And I remember just stopping and going, all right, so don't do that yet. What's going on with you? And I had a chat to myself, as you do. And I'm like, well, I want to hang them out in the sunlight and I don't want to put them in the dryer because I want my daughter to have that experience of smelling sunshine on her clothes. Like that special kind of smell and aroma that happens when things are freshly laundered and they've been out in the wind. And, it's one of those things that I really valued when I was growing up, that smell of fresh laundered clothes. And so I stopped, and now with every peg I started saying, and this is how I love my daughter. And I would peg her singlets on. Wow. And if it was one of mine, and I'm like, and this is how I love myself. So rather than seeing these things as obstacles to my rest, which makes them into a threat that I need to navigate, right? So I'm going to produce adrenaline. And that's the other part of the story. So if I fuel with something that I feel I can successfully navigate, I'll produce dopamine. And after it's done, I get this reward buzz. It's like I joke about when I finish the Samurai Sudoku on the weekend, the excerpt on the Good Weekend, and I'm walking around town like I've got an extra bounce to my step because I've mastered that. That type of reward is what dopamine gives us. The problem is that if I'm running this motivational system, this self-talk is running, oh my God, now if I don't get to work on time, I'm going to get fired. If this doesn't happen, I'm going to get in trouble. If I don't do, okay, great, now I've got to do the chores at home, now I've got to cook, I've got to clean, when am I going to rest? All of these now become fueled by adrenaline because they're seen as fearful obstacles. And even if I successfully do them, which we all do, I don't actually get rewarded for that. All I get is relief. And what comes after relief is just exhaustion. And so, when you talk about this disconnect, and I'm like, I'm seeing these people in this loop, right, where they're being fueled by adrenaline. The whole day is about a series of consequences they're trying to avoid, of threats and punishments, perceived threats and punishments, or real and actual threats and punishments in their days that they're trying to avoid, only to get to home, at which point they collapse into a state of exhaustion, the parasympathetic nervous system, only to wake up again because if they don't go to work now, they're scared. And so we have this cycle, which is a beautiful way of describing burnout and what we're going through. And because we don't have a choice, we need to keep going to work no matter how exhausted we are, no matter how like this cycle of threat of navigating perceived consequences, their lives just barely hanging in there. Right, it's not reinforcing and rewarding, is it? So we have to increasingly produce more and more adrenaline to get us over that line, to get us into the office, to get us to keep going, because the alternative is just always more fearful.
If someone's hearing this and thinking, this is the loop I'm in, where and I've been in that loop,
I've been in that loop.
I fall back into that loop. That loop is, it's the default mode, and it is how a lot of people are operating. If someone's hearing this, having an aha moment, can you offer a few invitations for places for them to just begin to make that shift?
Yeah, and I want to thank you for using the word invitation, because I want to acknowledge that it's not just here are your 3 strategies and you're out of that.
To tick off as well.
Tick off, your 5-step guide. Well, I do have a 5-step program. No, I don't, because this is a really hard, and it's kind of this, like you said, it's the default mode, right? We've all got brains that are hardwired. Well, they're soft-wired, the brain, quite frankly, but we're wired to be better safe than sorry. So we're looking for that threat response mode. More often than not, it's our default. You're right. And so I think we need to at least compassionately understand that the brain will naturally fall into that. I think it's that simple thing, that example maybe of the peg, where rather than seeing it as the obstacle to my tiredness, this grunt thing that I didn't want to do, that I resented, actually going, this is cuddling on the couch with my daughter is a wonderful way of expressing my love, and it feels comfortable and nice. But perhaps even more important is washing these clothes and putting them on the line, and also loving myself in that way, because it's the way that I want, right, to also wear my clothes. That's just a small example. And so I would say is connecting some of these activities more broadly to things that you do actually value, like even when work is tough, right? Is seeing your colleagues a part of your day, going in there and bonding as a team, something that gets you through, or is your work something that you can somewhere attach to the significance of that? I feel like my work has been such a North Star in terms of leading me out of my own burnout, is kind of showing up in the room because they're showing up and I'm showing up, and we're both these humans in some level of suffering, right? Life is hard to navigate, and going, I'm going to show up for that, and understanding how important that is for them and for me. Not from that perspective that I'm helping them, but that's kind of like holding space for that and being part of that, struggle as well. I am another human also walking this path, being able to connect with what I see as something that deeply drew me to my work. Now, not everyone gets to do something that they connect with deeply in their jobs, and I actually think part of the problem is that we assign falsely too much value and purpose into identifying as our work badge or label or whatever our, deployment at work is. I mean, I always joke is no one has their LinkedIn profile on their tombstone, nor will they want to. And if you think you're going to be lying on your deathbed thinking that just one more project under budget would have just, made this life worth it. And so I invite everyone to every now and again think about this deathbed moment, not in a morose or morbid way, but in a way that's clarifying, in terms of what is really important and how do I get to live more for that. And so regardless of whether I have a good day, a bad day, it's tough or it's not tough, the only reason or one of the reasons for my life and the purpose in my life is my daughter. I think once you have kids, it kind of comes with the packaging, right? It's really, even if you wish you could have more interests or more purposes outside of that, it just seems to filter so much of everything we care about becomes, them and their happiness. And that's, I think,
better and shifting and
always,
changing.
right? And changing and being like, the question is always like, am I being enough for her, or is she getting enough, or, is she happy? Is she going to be happy? How is she going to go? And that real kind of, for me, that's the apex purpose. And so the work doesn't matter. And so I've got stuff to do at work. I can make them dopaminergic or I can make them threat-based. I can subtly shift the way that I view these and go, okay, can I gamify my day? Can I start to, even something as simple as write down the tasks that I'm doing, then tick them off and say something about, you killed that. I killed that. Oh, wow. P's get degrees. 51. Wow, that's fantastic. Right? Because the way that your brain knows to reward you or not with dopamine, or to perceive something as a success or as failure, is up to you, is based on our expectations. We're the ones actually labeling the hashtags. It's almost like if we have this like Instagram file in the brain, and it gets to kind of all these moments in the day are going to be hashtagged. And it's up to us to kind of redefine what those hashtags are going to be, or to become more intentional with them. And so we turn these things that we think are threats going, oh, but I've done that. It's not threatening. I've done these deadlines before. It will be okay. So starting to have a language of self-soothing. So when you start to, and here's why we need to be better connected with the body, to feel the armoring where we're walking around, to drop anchor, which is a very simple kind of technique where we release the belly, soften the shoulders, open the mouth slightly, release the jaw, and drop the tongue on the bottom of the mouth. And we just take some long, deep, slow breaths in and out, circular, without holding. Maybe about 4 or 5 counts in and 4 or 5 counts out. And within 1 or 2 breath cycles, people notice that they're in the body, potentially for the first time that day. And the benefit of being in the body is I can't even begin, right? So let's not talk about that. But what we do when we drop anchor, and we start to drop anchor even as a game, often enough in each and every day is you start to notice when you are tensing, when you're upregulating, when the armoring in the body starts. And when we are able to let go a little bit and we're looser and we're softer, we reverse the impact of cortisol and adrenaline. So it's that opportunity to then shift mindsets and go from threat mode, pressure mode, stress mode, into potentially dopaminergic mode, which is, I can do this. I've done this. So let's just break this task down. Let's tick things off as we go. Let's just focus in on the present moment, not on the 28 other things that I'm going to have to do after this. So we can slowly train ourselves to stay in a state of dopamine, to detect earlier and earlier when we're going into adrenaline and stress, that connection with the body. And then to kind of have a clear demarcation of, for me, every time I left my office, my job was that job. There was, sometimes I still had to make phone calls or answer emails, but my life is what happens after work. So I was in oxytocin mode straight away. Mindset shift, body shifts. It's playtime. And of course, it's not always joyful at home. There's lots of demands and stressors, but if we're doing it from that perspective of bonding and connecting and loving, it's rewarding and reinforcing, and that should be our purpose. Whatever's happening before your day at work and whatever's happening after. There's so much buzz about AI and the impact of AI, and so many podcasts that I listen to, and they're all talking about there's going like the biggest impact's going to be this loss of purpose. I'm like, I can't wait for people to lose purpose or identity if it's related or fused with their work role.
Because again, people have purpose though? Do you think, outside of work?
I think whether you know it or not, if you're going to work and your life's all about work, that is your purpose. You may not like it, but that's what your claimed purpose is. And so that's where you're trying to derive meaning. And it's sad, right? Because people are like, oh, I don't want work to be my purpose. And I'm like, well, if there's nothing else you're living for, what you're doing most of the time at work and where you're kind of cultivating all of your energy, and if work is something you're worried about, scared about, stressed about 80% of the time, then that's what your purpose is by default, not because you've chosen, but even from a threat system, or where you're getting most of your sense of selfing or, reward, because there's two pathways. There's the oxytocin pathway and the dopamine pathway. And so we have a lot of lives that are so disconnected. We are living increasingly isolated, lonely lives, and that's the reality. It doesn't have to be, hopefully, but it's become like that. And so if we're not getting enough oxytocin or a sense of meaning and purpose and this fulfillment that comes in that zone where we're connecting with others, we're part of that, love family. So it doesn't have to be family members necessarily, but there's dogs or people around you. Dare I say cats? I'm not a cat person. So, I kind of feel like dogs are dogs. Maybe dogs, I think we've misspelled dogs. And I wonder if we need to reverse the G and the D sometimes. But if we don't have a lot of reward coming from that oxytocin network, then we're going to become over-reliant on the dopaminergic network. And the problem with that is that dopamine, we call it like the happiness chemical, but it isn't happiness. It's power. It's ego inflation. It's a sense of feeling good. And the danger with that is that then my ego might get better and better, but then that often is incongruent with healthy, happy relationships. And it doesn't last because what serves the ego today, what rewards my ego today, doesn't reward my ego tomorrow. So it's a very tricky pathway. And it also leads to a lack of fulfillment because dopamine increasingly requires more and more hits, right? Bigger, better, faster, stronger is the dopamine arena.
Goalpost moving.
Always, because what brought you a sense of achievement when you were 5 no longer makes you feel special when you're 35. And so when we follow the dopamine route, and I think lots of people are going to kind of go, oh my God, right, this drops for them. When we follow that dopamine route, when we've been used to kind of feeling good about ourselves and productive and, contributing part of this achievement world, is no matter how much we achieve, we get to that podium of achievement. And it's like, okay, once I get there, it's like, oh, this doesn't seem good enough anymore. Oh,
next.
But in order for that next to have value for us and to actually to release the same amount of dopamine, it now has to be harder, take longer. And so we start to cultivate lives where the more experience we get, the harder we've worked, the harder we now must work and keep working. That's a trap to me.
Slippery slope.
It's a slippery slope because to me, maybe because I'm lazy, which I'm not really lazy, but I like to joke about that, is expertise for me. Shouldn't it be defined by getting the most for the least? Like having the most bang for your buck, like being able to come into the office for 1 hour and earning the salary of 10 people, that to me is success.
Goals.
But this dopamine thing, right, is that in order for me to feel good about that, I need to actually be working harder and harder. So at a stage where I'm supposed to kind of work really hard, they told us just study hard, do well in the HSC, then get through uni and then you'll be good. And we're actually working harder than we've ever worked before. And we're like going, when's that safe space? Where's that space where I feel achieved? Where's that space where I'm going to feel good enough? But because that good enough is based on dopamine and achievement, we never get there. It's a false promise.
I have to say, since having a child, those thoughts just automatically, as we kind of touched on before, occur a lot more.
Yeah.
And it is a reference point. And I think it's also not being, I must do this. And it is kind of removing the pressure we put on ourselves. It's not swinging from one thing to the next. But that check-in point, the check-in question for me at the moment in this season is, will I look back and think I've worked too much? And that's just my constant kind of recalibration. And if it feels, there's been some weeks or months within this last, say, 18 months where I've thought, I've gone a little bit too far there, and then I've wound that back. But that question for me is a big one right now. I did want to touch on one more thing before we wrap up, and there's just so much I'd love to cover. It is around insomnia, because I really see a lot of what we've touched on today interconnected, and we've mentioned here, we have a long-standing relationship. I've been a client or a patient of yours for over 10 years, and I came to you off the back of a very traumatic experience. At the time, for a period of time, I had PTSD. I did mention it in a previous episode without sharing what that was. And I think for context, I'm happy to mention it, but I do want to, I guess, give a warning rather than just throwing it out there. So my experience was I was held up. I worked in a TAB while I was at university and a week after graduating from my master's. So that was the experience. And in the very short term, I had the insomnia and, I guess how you would think someone would, experience that moment. But very quickly I pushed that to the side and I just got on with things as I do, racing through life.
Dopamine mode.
And then nearly 2 years to the day, I was in a meeting at work, and not a stressful meeting, and I had a full-blown panic attack. It was in a hospital, which that kind of, worked out somewhat okay, given I just went to emergency. But this went on for 3 months, full-blown panic attacks. I was having cardiac investigations, ruling that out because that's how it presents. And, when you're having anxiety and panic attacks, you catastrophize them, which then exacerbates them. But I had worked with another therapist, and then I did get referred to you. So I came to you in this state 2 years on. This phantom memory, this body experience, this subconscious subconscious part of my brain remembering the trauma, which I hadn't, dealt with, and on top of that, insomnia attached with all of it. So we're seeing then statistics around sleep. 60% of Australians are having difficulty falling asleep, and then around 15 to 20% are experiencing insomnia. And even with everything else we've touched on, sleep, as you said, this is a key phase of rest, so much around our emotional regulation, our ability to heal and process things, is being impacted.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in this space? And do you think this is a byproduct of everything we've spoken on today?
Yeah. I mean, we're not having enough time in that rest and digest mode. You know, that space where we've got 4 or 5 hours of being able to downregulate of an evening to kind of start that process of being able to have our stress systems, our, you know, worries, our anxieties kind of, you know, peter off into the background, that we switch into a sense of this is where I need to be. This is, you know, my safe space. This is my happiness, where we intentionally create that switch and that crossover into a different kind of, from doing mode into receiving mode in some ways even, like, you know, because it is a sense of, you know, getting that reward for working. So when we're going from stress to the second stress, which is the second job at home, to then collapsing into sleep, the body hasn't had a time to switch sets. So we're in this constant set of cortisol, adrenaline, worry, reminders, mental stress, physiological stress. The body is just used to producing all of these kind of chemicals to assist us to get through. And most of us are on the go 12 to 14 hours a day. You know, if we kind of start to really think about when we get up in the morning, whether it's even going to the gym and things like that, which are necessary and really important for our mental health, but they just add so much time. And so when your body's used to needing to produce like these go hormones and these go chemicals for 12 to 14 hours, that's not, you know, that's not what the design of the human being is. The Homo sapiens sapien is not supposed to be doing 12 to 14 hours of work. I mean, so I do see a lot of this kind of impacting quality of sleep. Sometimes people might be getting the quantity, and I think that's another kind of sleep issue that we need to also address and acknowledge, is that some people who, you know, you just ask the 6 to 8 hours a day question, they're like, yeah, for sure. But that quality sleep isn't there. I do caution against hyperfixation on sleep, because I do think that what I call orthosomnia, where we then, you know, similar to orthorexia, where that fear and like there was almost like this disordered thinking and phobia almost of eating things that weren't healthy. Yeah. And that's an unhealthy way of being. And I also see people becoming almost phobic in the way that if something's interfering with their sleep or their sleep routine or not getting enough sleep, then there's almost a catastrophization. Now, I've got to say, every mother that's ever had a baby, every new family, not just mother, father as well, will kind of tell you that, yes, while optimized sleep is amazing, you'd be surprised on how little you can get by on. And that would have been true for every single human being in, you know, for millions, for millennia, right? And so if it caused, you know, death and illness that quickly, does that make sense? Yeah. We wouldn't have really survived. So I want to kind of not say that it's not important, but that there is a danger to swing too far the other way. And that orthosomnia, like that sense of, you know, hyperfixation on enough sleep, correct sleep, sleep hygiene, all of these things is probably that anxiety is going to interfere with sleep itself. And so, you know, I think that needs to be acknowledged and said. But I do think we need to look at our sleep routine starting 2 to 4 hours prior to sleep. You know, and, you know, you've got a book coming out, and it's got a great chapter which you were very kind to ask me to contribute slightly to. But what I loved about that chapter is all of the stuff that you've already learned and been implementing in your own life. And one of the best ones is like that writing your worries down earlier. And I would just suggest that not before bed. I would write those worries down before you relax. So maybe it's just after doing the dishes and you're just about to hit the couch, watch something or listen to a podcast or talk with your partner or your kids or, you know, with the dog, settle in. That's when I would just before that write that worry list or that list that kind of just anything that's in here.
Get it out.
As generative as you can, like as much as you can generate of, or like even that sense of got to make a doctor's appointment, you know, anything that the brain might knock on the door of attention at 3 a.m. going, do you know we need to go make that appointment with the doctor for that thing? You know, it's that once a year checkup that, you know, if you don't get, because that's what it's going to do. It's going to find that opportunity if you're kind of going from one sleep cycle to the next. Food for me as well is another way that we can use to kind of get the body to downregulate in a different way. And, you know, I don't know, there's not a lot of perfect science on it, but I've been increasingly become interested in even things that are less energy dense for the body to digest. You know, so if I am struggling a lot, I now switch my food at night to rather the things that are a little bit more energy dense, meaning like things that are going to take a lot more energy for my body to break down and utilize.
Digest.
So things like, you know, super cooked pumpkin or, you know, having like my vegetables cooked so they're really mushy and soft and, you know, things that are going to be super easy for my belly to digest so that it has less, you know, less need for a lot of energy so that, again, my system can downregulate sooner. It's just a slight thing that I kind of have found that, you know, I'm kind of interested in foods that help you, you know, a somatic nervous system downregulation. Obviously, you know, slow release carbohydrates are part of that. You don't want anything that's going to spike your cortisol or insulin a little bit later, and you'll be the expert on this. But even sometimes avoiding meat, as much as I love my protein and my meat. But if I am going through a really tough time, or I'll have meat that's super boiled in broth or, you know, in soups and things like that. So that, again, I'm really looking at that quality of how much load on my system some of that is. And, you know, that's just something I'm interested in, and it may or may not be very effective. But, you know, that writing your worries down, writing all of the to-do list down. But then the next step to that is creating a commitment to look at that during the day tomorrow, so that then the brain starts to trust that you're efficient. And so it doesn't have to remind you at 3 a.m., 7 a.m., 3:45 p.m., 4:45 p.m. It's like, I don't have to remind her more than once. She's written it down. I know Jess has this.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
She's going to get to it. So we also need to, you know, work hand in hand with that system that is trying to make sure we don't forget anything, right? Do everything that we need to do. So we need to also have that commitment in being able to eke out some time the next day or once a week to get to that worry list as well as we can. The other thing as well is tiredness is your best friend when you have a sleep issue. And it's the one that's hardest because we really don't believe we can get through with tiredness. But if we can maintain a set wake-up time and then know that in order for us to sleep well, we won't be able to go back to sleep until 16 hours has passed. And if that 8-hour, 16-hour waking, 8-hour sleep window is the one that works for you, then it's a nice way of, like, if I sleep in till, you know, I had a bad night and I sleep in 2 to 3 hours. Most people try to go back to bed on the same time, but now I'm not going to queue for sleep for 16 hours later. So I've just pushed the whole rhythm. And so I see this so often where people are like trying to go to bed, but I tried to go to bed at 9. You can't try to sleep because effort and sleep are inconsistent. There are two different systems. You can't be on and off at the same time. So sleep is what happens when we stop doing anything. Sleep is what happens. Sleep comes to us. You do not sleep. It is not an activity that you are doing. And most of us have this mentality. And most of us are parented in that way where we're told, go to sleep. It's a task that we can do. So we sit there and we try our little hearts out, but that's inconsistent. So things like watching some TV. I'm one where, you know, the older I get in that 3 a.m. waking up and, you know, sometimes 4 or 5 times in the evening. But I don't struggle with that at all. Within seconds, I'm back asleep because I just roll over, put on a show on my phone that sits near my bedside table. It's familiar. It's, you know, repetitive. I've seen that show 5,000 times. I can roll over and go to sleep within seconds often. And so there is no sense of me having stayed up or been awake for a long time. It's very easy for me to go back. And so I've developed zero anxiety about that normal sleep-wake cycle that happens during the phase of evening. So there's a lot with sleep that does have to do with misperceptions about sleep being a skill that we can do, that we will achieve sleep. All we're doing is creating the right environment and the right mindset so that sleep can come to us. And if you haven't slept and you can't sleep tonight, that's okay. If you've been in bed for about 10 minutes to 20 minutes and you haven't gone back to sleep, grab your pillow, go back out to the lounge room, watch some TV or read a book or just cut your losses. And odds are that's enough to reset for the next night. And so once Jess's book comes out, it has a wonderful chapter on sleep and some expert tips that are fabulous.
Yes.
And I do recommend everyone reads that once they get that.
Very grateful that you contributed, and there was so many sections in there that I could have asked for your expertise, but I did really want a psychologist to contribute from a cognitive behavioural therapy perspective with insomnia. So there was no one else that I thought of or I would have wanted to contribute.
Well, it was a great honour, so thank you. But again, I think it's such a vital part of that rest and digest system, that system that allows us to re-energise and to release also trauma. And I think this is one of the things psychologically is that how much work, whether you want to call it the subconscious or that part of the mind that isn't active, is responsible for in terms of emotional healing and psychological adjustment.
We've covered a lot of ground here today, and to kind of bring it all together, if there was one thing, one anchor, one tool or action point or invitation you'd like to leave people with, what would you like that to be?
Learn to drop into your body and out of your mind. The mind often created the problem. It's not going to fix it. So learn to get into your body.
We've got the dropping anchor technique, and I've been doing it for years, and even just having this conversation today, it's a reminder that that's a tool, and things drop away and then you can pick them back up. So being kinder about that as well, that's definitely been a journey for myself. My very last question that I ask all of my guests is, what 3 things help you stay at the top?
My dog. My daughter, not necessarily in that order, and food.
When you were talking about the slow before, it's nearly like the holidays, or when we're away, and the slow meals, and you're not watching the clock, and you've got nowhere else to be, and you've been there for 5 hours. It's medicinal. I mean, there's people there, there's laughter, there's delicious food, there's so much in that. Thank you so very much for joining me for today's conversation. If people want to follow along, I'll have links in the show notes, but where's the best place for them to connect?
Yeah, well, basically we've got a perimenopause retreat for women in perimenopause. We do these beautiful luxury retreats where you get, a lot of body stuff like so sound baths and Pilates and breath work and meditation, but also expert workshops, so with GPs and myself talking about all aspects of, health. And we often do burnout retreats and retreats for women in perimenopause as well. And that's about to be announced. So by the time this show comes out, I think we'll be well on the way of people would be able to find that out about that perimenopause retreat in August in the amazing Villa Riyadh in Byron Bay. But most of my stuff, I think, I'm not very active on social media. So, but I am trying to get better at posting things. But I run a breathwork and drop-in meditation once a month in Paddington in Sydney. And I also have, a very comprehensive website. I'm often doing online courses as well as these retreats. And follow me on Instagram or check out my website.
Perfect. We'll have the website and the link to the retreats, and I would love to come to one. I'll have to book in when I'm able to get away from Millie. That is the dance at the moment.
I wouldn't mind having like a mummy-daughter one actually, or a mum and child one. Yeah, like a mums and bubs. Yeah, it would be, I think that's the population that most needs it, right?
Yep. Help balance the both. That would be amazing. Dr. Maria Elena Lukeides, thank you so much for joining me on Stay at the Top. Just incredible conversation. Otherwise, if you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do. You won't miss an episode. Next week, I'll be back with a solo episode helping you all not only reach the top, but sustainably stay there. And if you haven't already pre-ordered for the long run, the link is in the show notes. And there's some incredible guest experts in there, as well as everything I've learned over the last 20 years of doing this as well. Anyway, I'll see you all next week. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.